Hello, everyone. I hope you all can hear me okay. First and foremost, thanks for joining us here today. As you know, today we are going over the account setup for WeVideo for owners and admins. My name is Joel. I'm part of the customer success team here at WeVideo, and with me is Ricky, also part of customer success. Um, Before we get started, I do want to note that as an attendee, you are currently muted. The reason for this is we have, a good amount of users that might join us today. So want to get through the demo together, and then at the end, we'll open it up for questions if we need more of a dialogue. In the meantime, as I'm going through the demo and talking about the setup and everything that's needed, you'll notice that in your go-to webinar control panel, you do have a questions tab. You should see it there with a little arrow. You can open it up, and Ricky here will be answering questions if you do have any throughout the demo. All you have to do is type it in there, send it, and then Ricky will be actively answering questions as they come in. Again, at the end, I'll unmute everyone, and then we can go through a more formal discussion at that end. I'm not sure how many people will end up attending today, so it could get chaotic if everyone is able to sort of speak throughout the demo. So I'll unmute everyone then, and I'll periodically remind that as we go on in case we have anyone joining us late. That being said, Ricky and I will turn off our webcams so that you have a full screen of the actual demo once we get going here. And again, please, if you do have questions, pop them in. Ricky will answer those. And if we need to discuss them further, we can do that once we're done here. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and then get started. I'm gonna stop sharing my webcam and sharing my screen here. Okay, so at this point, everyone should be seeing my screen. I'm going to flip over to my account that I'm logged into, and we can get going here. Okay, so before I do get started here, I want to quickly show everyone the setup that I have on my end. I'm actually logged into 3 separate WeVideo accounts. This first one here is an admin level account. As admins and owners here today, this is what your account is going to look like. You'll notice at the top you have a couple of tabs, including the admin tab. This is where we're going to focus today. Only admins and owners will have this admin tab, which means anyone who's an admin or owner in the account that you're in will be able to co-manage together. So anything that an admin can do, an owner can do, and vice versa. You can just think of an owner as a super admin, but essentially it's the same role with the same capabilities. Moving on to my second window here, you'll notice that this the account itself looks, pretty identical to the admin level, but you'll notice up here in the tabs, you no longer have the admin tab instead of the groups tab. This is a teacher account. So if you're a teacher, this is what your account is going to look like. You don't have admin rights, which means you don't have any account management capabilities as a teacher. The groups function, which we will go over today, allows teachers to get organized with their classes, to set up their classes, their students, and be able to work with them from their own teacher account remotely. As admins, you can set up your own groups if needed. And again, we'll go through those in more detail as we move forward here. This is the indicator though up here. All of your teachers, as you begin to distribute your licenses, should be made or should be given the teacher role. You can make teachers admins, however, just know that if they're an admin, they will be co-managers along with you in your account. Finally, switching over to my third and final window here, we have a student account. Again, the layout essentially the same. The differences appear again with the tabs. You'll notice that students do not have the admin or the groups tab. They don't have any function to manage. Instead, they're only given what they need as students to create content, to edit, to work with others, etc. but again, the layout is essentially the same. Flipping back to the admin account here, I want to quickly go over sort of the layout before we jump into it and go through the account setup process. So in the center, you have your most recent edits. You can think of these as shortcuts to the work that you've been doing recently. So this will come into handy for students as they work on different projects for different classes. The ones that they've been working on the most or the most recent will pop in here in the center as shortcuts. Hovering over them, you get a couple of different functions, one of them being the edit button, so you can jump right into your edit as soon as you log into your account. At the top, you have a couple other shortcuts. You have the ability to start a new video here, and then you have the ability to start a recording here as well. I want to quickly show the recording because it does have a couple of cool functions that you may not be aware of. Within WeVideo, you can use the webcam, as you can see here, to record yourself. You can also screencast. So if you need to record your screen, maybe talk through something that you're doing in your computer, you can record your screen as needed, or you can do both as well. So you can record yourself and the screen as you maybe go through some sort of dialogue of something that you may be sharing with others for your video. This, of course, also records audio, so you can record yourself, the screen, and capture your audio all at the same time if needed. Once your recording is saved or finished, it stays in WeVideo, and then you can use it as an edit or export it as a video. Everyone has, this function, so doesn't matter the role. And then here, you can see shortcuts to templates. So if you need to start a video based on one of these templates, you can just click on one of these. You can see that there's more, and then you can create a video from there. With the current state of remote learning, everything going on, we are continuing to put more templates here that will make it easier for teachers and for educators to perform remote learning with their students. So be on the lookout for more templates to help guide in that process. On the left-hand side, you will find some general usage information. The top circle here is your use publishing time. Now, this is shared across everyone in the subscription, and it's based on the number of seats that your account has. As an example, my account here that I'm logged into has 50 seats, which means you can see this highlighted part here. I have 50 hours worth of publishing time per month. If you have 1,000 seats in your account, you have 1,000 hours per month, etc. So this is shared. You're not limited as a user to an hour, per month or anything like that. You can take up as much publishing time as needed, as long as your account has it. One thing to keep in mind is that publishing time does reset at the end of the month, so you will always get that back. This is not a worry that you should have. You're never going to run out. You're always going to have it. Some months, some users may use more, some may use less, but you will always get this back at the end of the month reset. The bottom ring here is your storage. My account has 250 gigabytes of online cloud storage. Yours may have more, yours may have less based on the number of seats that you have. Again, this is seat count storage as well. This is all shared with everyone in your account. Again, there's no limit to how much storage your users use. Some will use more, some will use less, but everything is shared. And one thing to note here, this does not reset like your publishing time. So whatever number you have here, that's the number of storage you will have during the duration of your subscription. That being said, you can always delete things, media you no longer need, videos you don't need, and anything you delete gives you back that storage. So you can always get it back by removing content you no longer need in your account. Lastly, down here at the bottom, you'll notice you have a user guide and a shortcut to manage your account settings here. And I'll also point out the little question mark on the upper right here for other resources, helpful resources that everyone has access to if you ever have questions down the road. With that, let's go ahead and get started in the actual account setup process. We'll go over everything that's needed as a new WeVideo account owner to ensure that all your users can get in, the permissions are set, and we'll go over other details that are important. Before we get started, I quickly want to welcome anyone that may have joined us a little late. Quick note, you are muted at this time. I'm going to unmute everyone once the demo is over. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the GoToWebinar tool. There's a question tab there. I have a colleague here, Ricky, who will answer questions, type them in as they're needed. Okay, so let's start here with the account setup. What I've done here is I've clicked on the admin tab to bring me to this window. Now that you have your account provisioned and open, you should have access to it. It may just be you as an owner in there now. Maybe you've explored and played around with the members section already and you brought in some users. For those of you that haven't, let's go in here and talk about how that's going to work so that you can begin that process of inviting members to your account. So we'll click the members page here first. This is what it's going to look like once you begin to actually distribute your licenses. You'll see here you get a nice list view of all of the members. You'll have some general information here, name, email address, their role, student, teacher, owner, you can see here, and then some other information over here, their storage, their last active date, etc. If you ever need to sort this, you can with the sorting buttons up here. You can also filter to find specific users, and then you can download this as a file for external use if needed. Additionally, you can search for members using the search member or the search bar over here in the upper right corner. On the bottom left, you'll notice your seat count. In my particular account, I have 50 seats and I have 13 of those taken. So you'll always see here where you are as you continue to distribute your licenses. If you ever get to the point where you're filled up completely and you no longer have any room, you do have a couple options. One is you can actually delete members that maybe don't need access anymore or they're not using, etc. Anytime you delete a user, you get that license back and you can give it to a new user if needed. The other thing is you can reach out to us, let us know if you need more licenses or if anything's going on there, and then we can talk about other options as well. Now to actually add members, you're going to click the add member button here. And you're going to have a few options here, so we'll go through these together. The first is using the invite code. Every account has a code specifically tied to their account. What you can do is you can use this code and share it with users who currently have free accounts. So this invite code option only works if anyone in your school or your district has a free WeVideo account. The code will convert their free account into an education account and bring them inside of your subscription. So it's important to note this is only beneficial, the invite code, for users and free. If you have teachers and students who don't have an account or maybe who were part of a trial or a pilot, the invite code will be useless for them. This is specifically designed to convert free users. The registration link is an option for distributing a link, you can see here, based on account role. So if you were going to bring in, let's say, a teacher or a group of teachers, you can use this option, simply change the role to teacher or to the role that you're going to share this to. Once you have the proper role, you can copy this invitation link, email it to, let's say, your group of teachers. Once they follow this link, they will create their own account. This link will open up a window where they'll need to input their name, their email, they'll create a password at that point. It takes about a minute or so to create. Once they do that, WeVideo will create their account and bring them into your subscription with the name, email, and password that they created with the page they opened up with this link. You can do this to bring in teachers, students, admins, etc. And all you need to do is send out the invitation link. And then those users will do the rest. They'll need to follow it and create their account on there. I'm going to skip over the Google Sync and Sync with Office for now. I'll come back to these. But first, let me go through the import from CSV option. The import from CSV option is a great way to bring in users in mass. What this does is you go in here, you download a CSV template here. These are the guidelines that you're going to have. First name, last name, email, password, group, and role. So you simply build a list using these sections here. You can bring in, admins, teachers, students. Just make sure you give them the proper role. Of course, you'll want to give them their email that's tied to their district or school. You can create a temporary password for them. No issues there. They can always change it later. Once you fill up the list, you can browse it, import it into your WeVideo account, and then WeVideo will create an account for everyone that you have in that list. So it's a good way to bring in bulk users at once, or you can import, a couple lists at a time as needed. Now, the last options available for you here are a sync via Google or Office. So depending on your district, you may be one of these. The setup is essentially the same. What you would do is you're gonna sync your Google or Office domain with WeVideo. Once you do that, on the Google side, you're gonna sync your OUs. You can sync all of your OUs or only a portion of them. And then once that's the case, any user, teacher, or student who is part of the OUs that you synced will be able to access your account by logging in with Google Single Sign-On using their school credentials, of course, their email and password for Google. You can sync all of your OUs or just a portion of them. And once that's in place, you as an admin, you as an owner, you don't really have to worry about bringing in users one by one or by CSV, by link. All you have to do is set the sync and you're good to go. Your users can come in automatically with their Google credentials. The idea is the same for an Office sync. You sync your domain, you select the groups tied to your Office sync that you want to come in, and then your users can come in with the Office login. These are great options if you have a large account, close to 1,000 or in the thousands of seats. This is probably a good option for you if you are a Google or Office district. If your account is covering all of your student and teacher body, I highly recommend going with one of these options. It'll make your life a lot easier. Once you do the sync, you're good to go. Simply direct your students to log in via the Google button or the Office button. That being said, there's probably questions on the line. At this point, I would invite everyone to use the question button again on your control panel on GoToWebinar. Ricky will answer those via text or by typing. And then at the end of our demo here, we can unmute everyone and have a more thorough discussion. I do see some questions coming in already, great. So Ricky, you can take care of those as they continue to float in. Awesome. So as you distribute your seats, your seat count here will continue to grow, and then your user base will grow here as well. Your list will enlarge as more and more users come in. Going back to the admin tab, I come back to this menu here. So as an owner, as an admin, this is going to be probably the first thing that you're going to start to do. Start to think about who is going to come in, who's going to be part of your subscription, and then you can distribute your licenses in the members tab here. And then you can use any of the options we just went over, depending on what makes more sense. One thing that I did not mention, but I should mention, if your account is on the lower end, 30 seats, 50 seats, 100 seats, doing a Google or Office sync is probably not the way to go. I would recommend doing a CSV import at that time, if not sharing the registration. Okay, great. So that's sort of phase one, step one of the account setup process. Make sure your members have access. You have a couple of options there. We just went through them. Once your users start trickling into your account, the next thing you're going to want to think about is your settings and your permissions for your users. So clicking the settings button here allows you to manage and set the permissions that each user role is going to have. On the left-hand side here, you'll notice that you have the user roles that I keep mentioning: admin, teacher, student. This is where you can set the limits, if you're gonna have any, for each role. So the cool thing about WeVideo is that you can actually set different limits for different users, right? So for students, you might wanna have more restrictions for them in here, because of course they're students, they're younger. Maybe you don't want their content floating around the internet, YouTube, social media. You can restrict all that here. And then for your teachers and admins, maybe you can be a little more flexible because obviously they're staff, and maybe you want to give them more flexibility. So you can do that by flipping these switches on or off. We'll go through these together right now to give you an idea of what this looks like. And we'll do the student as an example, just because this is probably the one you want to focus on first. Make sure this one is set correctly. Before I get started, I do want to point out that below student, I have a couple other user roles here. Actually, I have a pretty large list. On your account, you're not going to have anything under students. The reason for this is because you can actually create new user roles if it was needed. For different groups of students, maybe by grade level, maybe by building or school level. To do this, I'll briefly demo this. Typically, districts don't create additional roles, but I'll quickly show you how you would do that in case you would need to. So if you wanted to create a role, let's say for your seniors, because they're older, they're getting ready to graduate, even in this time, what you would want to do is right-click the student and then click duplicate. You can, name this class of 2020 or something like that. Click save. Once you do that, WeVideo will create that additional role for you that you can then give to your class of 2020. By doing this, you differentiate the student role for younger student versus now your class of 2020 role. And now you can give your seniors a different set of permission than the rest of your student body who are younger students. So this is why under student, I have a bunch of different roles here, because you do actually have the ability to create additional roles if needed. Again, typically most districts don't do this. All of the students will have the same permissions, but again, you can dictate on your own account what that's going to look like. Now, to go over the actual permissions here, and again, I'm under students. The permissions are built into 3 different sections. You can see them here: sharing, projects, and media. So this first section, media, here is asking if you would like for your students to connect to third-party sites and download media from those third-party sites onto their WeVideo accounts. So as an example, if I have Google Drive on, Facebook, and any of these other third-party sites here, my students from their WeVideo account would be able to get media from, let's say, their Facebook account and download it and import it into their WeVideo account and then use it in their edits and projects. Typically, districts have most of these off except Google Drive, if they have Drive in school, if they use this in the classroom. And usually they have all the other options off. But again, everyone here as an admin, as an owner, will have the ability to decide what works best for their students. And then for teachers and admins, you can come in here and do the same thing, turn things on and off based on what you want to give the rest of your users. Scrolling down to the next section, still under students, is projects. This one's fairly straightforward. You have 2 options here, or 2 things to consider. The first is, do you want to allow your students to create new projects? So what this is asking is, Do you want your students at any point when they're using WeVideo to be able to start a new project on their own? If this is off, your students will not be able to start new projects. They would need to wait for their teachers to assign a project to them, or they could work on projects that were assigned or that have been assigned prior. My suggestion is having this one on just so your students can always start a project if they need to. There's going to be times when teachers may not want to create a project for their students. Maybe they'll just direct them and say, hey, create a video on this, or here are some directions. Just send the video when you're done. Having this on allows a student to always be able to start projects whenever needed. The bottom section here is asking if you want to allow your students to be able to invite other users to their projects. So if you allow this, your students, for example, would be able to invite other students to a project that they're working on, and then they would be able to collaborate together. Now for this, you have a couple of options, and you can see them here three. You have three options. The first is no, students cannot invite anyone to their projects. Any collaboration would happen only if a teacher assigns a projects to 2 or more users together. The next is students can invite users from groups they belong to. We're going to go into groups next, but you can think of a group as a class. So this is essentially saying you can only invite another student if they're your classmate, if you share a class with them. If you don't share a class with another student, you cannot invite them to your project. And then lastly, you can invite anyone from within the subscription, regardless of whether they're classmates to you or not. Typically, I recommend leaving it with this groups option so that students can only invite classmates to the projects. But again, you can dictate what works best in this remote learning time that we're in. Finally, scrolling down to sharing, this is all about the finished videos. So when a student or any user really finishes a video, it's gonna go here to the exports page. This is where you can see it. This is a final product, this is a final video. All finished videos that are exported go to the export page, and they remain in WeVideo unless you give them the ability to share outside. So you can decide how strict you are with the sharing of content. So going back to my admin and settings and going into students, scrolling down here to the sharing section, you can see that you have a couple of things to consider. The destination section here is fairly straightforward. Anything that you turn on here, you're allowing your students to send your videos or their videos to these third-party sites. So if YouTube is on, for example, they can take their finished exported video from the WeVideo environment and send it and upload it to their YouTube account. Obviously, they have a couple of options here, depending on what you turn on for them. You can choose to turn everything off. Maybe you leave Google Drive on because you use it in school. But again, you decide where your students can take their finished videos and possibly share them to. Up here, you have a couple of very specific questions. Things like, do you want to allow your students to download finished exports? If this is on, then your students will be able to download a personal file or a personal copy of everything that they export. Once they do that, they can share it anywhere, right? YouTube, social media, etc. So if you don't want your student videos floating around, you probably want to remove the ability to download files of those videos. You have other things to consider in here. Do you want your student videos to be private by default? Do you want your students to be able to change the privacy from private to public, etc.? I definitely recommend everyone in here to go through these thoroughly, make sure you have them set properly. You can do that for everyone, student, teacher, admin, and then have that set. Once you're ready to go, if at any point you need to update anything in here, you can do that. just come back, turn things on and off with these switches, and then the permissions change right there and then. So it's very easy to update these very fast if something isn't working and you do need to change something. Okay, great. So if there's any questions, I hope that you've been continuing to upload those. Ricky will answer them, and then in a few minutes here, we can open up the dialogue for a more, one-on-one here. Cool. So we've gone through members, we've gone through settings. At that point, once you do that, your members are going to have access to WeVideo as you continue to share your licenses. And these members that come in, whether they're teachers, students, or admins, their permissions will be set as you went through the settings here and sort of set the limits of what everyone can do. The last step to an account setup is the groups. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can think of groups as classes. So this function is really going to be more designed for your teachers. But I do want to go over it because you as an admin can also create groups. You'll notice that your group function is inside the admin tab here versus a teacher's who has it up here as a tab. So as I mentioned earlier, you can think of groups as classes. So if I go in the group function here in the teacher account, this is an example of what it's going to look like. A teacher should create one group for every class that they teach. If they only teach one class in elementary, you create one group for that class. If you teach 6 classes in middle or high school, you create one group per class. Obviously, you can name them whatever you like, subject, period, whatever is going to keep you organized. Once you create your classes, inside of each class, you're going to have the full roster of students for that class. This is crucial. This group creation process is crucial for teachers as you start promoting internally within your schools, within your districts. This is one of the first things that should come up when talking to teachers. Make sure you create a group for each class and make sure you bring your students to those classes that you create. If teachers don't bring in their students in here, teachers will not have access to students, which means they're not going to be able to see the projects they're working on, their edits, the videos they're publishing, the work that they're producing, nothing. Teachers can only connect that way with their students by creating their groups and then bringing in the roster of students to those groups. Once that happens, this is what it's going to look like. Here's an example, history period 4. This is my class. Of course, you're going to have more users in here as a teacher, 20, 25, 30 students, whatever you may have. And then to look at a student's work, you simply highlight one of the students, you double click, and then you can see the little profile here within your teacher account. You can see the videos they've published. In this case, this student has published 3 videos. And then you can see the projects that they're currently working on. In this case, 17. You can highlight any project here. You can click on it. You can view their edits. You can edit for them. You can leave them comments and feedback, etc. All from your own teacher account. So great for remote learning, distance learning. You don't have to be next to the students. On the left-hand side, you'll notice that you can also see the groups that each student belongs to. So in this case, these are the groups that this student is tied to. Students can be in as many groups as they need to. There's no limit there. And then teachers can create as many groups as they need to. No limits on that end either. Now, the group creation process, fairly straightforward. A teacher or an admin will simply click the plus sign down here on the bottom right. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to name the group or the class. So for example, we'll just do history, let's just say period 7. Again, you can name this whatever you like, whatever as a teacher, as an admin is going to keep you organized. Once you name the group, the class, you do have the option to actually start selecting users. Obviously, you would select the students that you have in this class to bring them to the group. However, I wouldn't do this in this step yet. Don't select any students at this point. The reason for this is if your account has 1,000, 2,000, or even more seats, you don't want to scroll through 2,000 users to handpick the 25 that go in this class. There's an easier way to bring in your students. So at this point, simply name the group, click create. You'll see that the class is created right off the bat right in here. So now if I go in here in the group, it's empty, right? The last step is to actually invite my students to join this group. Obviously, I'm only gonna invite the students that I have in my history period 7 class. To do this, I'm gonna use the group code that you see on the bottom left here. So you can grab this code and share it with the class for this particular group. You can email it to your students. You can either use Google Classroom or another LMS. You can put it in there. Once your students get this code, they're going to log into their student accounts. Again, this is what a student account looks like. On the bottom left, you'll see that there's this join group class button. They're going to click there, they're going to enter the code, and they're going to click join. Once they do that, each student is going to auto-populate your group so that you as a teacher get the full roster. So you don't have to bring in everyone by yourself. Simply share the group code and then your students will auto-populate themselves. If one of your students is having trouble, they can't figure out the code, they don't know how to do it, you can add members yourself as well here. You can search for the student and then click save once you select them in here. Ideally though, this is not the case, or it's just 1 or 2 students that we're having trouble. Once you do that, then you're set. As a teacher, you're going to have all of your classes here, and within each class, you're of course going to have all of your rosters. So you're going to have full access to all your students. You're going to be able to assign projects to them, and you're going to be able to follow up with everything that they're doing within the projects you assign. Again, you can have as many groups in here as you need, no limits there. And I'll say this just one more time. As you start connecting with your teachers, please let this be the first thing that you go over. And the importance of what a group is and why it's crucial for a teacher to create them. No groups means no access to their students, no view into what they're doing. That being said, we have just covered member settings and groups. This is the core of your account setup. Once you have your members, your students, your teachers, they're going to be able to join your account. Their settings will be set, and teachers will have the ability to organize their classrooms. Once that's in place, all teachers will be able to create projects and start working with WeVideo with their students, and the real creation process can begin with teachers and students. As an admin here today, you probably won't have to do too much once the account setup is in place. Yes, you may have questions here and there. You may have to maybe delete members or make space or do something like that. But overall, the account will run itself for the most part. Teachers will simply start using WeVideo with their students, and then as an admin, you can just make sure that everything is running smoothly. Okay, now that we've reached sort of the end of the account setup, I do want to mention that of course there are other areas that we haven't touched today. Projects, media exports. These are not areas that are part of the account setup. If you need more information on those, you can get the user guide down here on the bottom left. We have written information on all of the different areas available to you in WeVideo. We also have tons of content online. We have onboarding videos that go through each area individually. And then we also have a teacher webinar series. We actually have one tomorrow where we do go inside of the projects, media, and exports page. So if you did want to see that, feel free to sign up for the teacher version of this webinar, and then we'll go through that information in there. With that, I want to open it up to any potential questions. I'm going to unmute everyone. Hopefully this works. Just give me 1 second as an attendee. Okay, so I just unmuted everyone, or I gave everyone the ability to unmute. So within the control panel, you'll see the little microphone. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you do have any questions, and then we can go through those here together. So I'll just give everyone a few seconds here to unmute. And then we can go from there if there are any questions.
Hi, real quick, this is Ricky. Just letting you guys know that unfortunately I am unable to see the questions. So if you did have any questions in the question box, I wasn't able to answer because I think it's there's something on my end that's not working properly. So I just want to give you guys a heads up if there was any questions in that chat
Good
box.
to know. Good to know.
So,
Thanks, Ricky.
yeah.
Yeah, so we do apologize about that. We do have a few, so we can go through those here together. I see a few people already unmuted. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask away, and then we can go through the written ones that Ricky wasn't able to get to.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it important to have a certain browser? That's the message I got somewhere, and yet I'm able to go into the program.
Great question. The best one to use would definitely be Chrome. You can also use Firefox, but Chrome would be your best bet. You'll be able to use most, but not all will give you the ability, for example, to use the screen recording function. That's currently only built into Chrome.
Okay.
So yeah, if there was one that I would highlight, it would definitely be Google Chrome.
Okay.
Good question. And I do see that one here, and I see, let's see, there's another one here. There's a question by Alice that asks if admins are the only users to add students into the accounts. The answer to that is yes. As a teacher, you can't invite your students to join the subscription. Only admins have that power. So if a teacher, couldn't get a student in for whatever reason, or needed access that way, teachers would need to get a hold of an admin so that they can bring them into the subscription. There was another question here. Can you change settings once students are in and are using the program? Yes. So within the admin settings section here, if something's not working, maybe you had YouTube on, for example, under destinations, and you come to find that all your students are sending things to YouTube, you can always come back, turn this off, and then update the settings that way.
I have a question.
Yes.
My question is, on a certain group, can you make a student an administrator if you were working on, let's say, a grad video? Just for a certain group, could you have a student to be an administrator as well?
So within groups, let me show you here. Let me use this one as an example. It wasn't there. So there is this add change manager function within the group, as you can see on the left here. However, what you're asking for wouldn't actually be a possibility for students, because students don't have the group tab up here. So that extra admin or manager within the group function would only be possible for, let's say, if you had another teacher helping you with a class or with a particular project, you can make another teacher a manager. But for students, because they don't have the group function, they wouldn't be able to actually manage a group themselves. However, once students are part of a project together, you can essentially have one manage that particular project, because they'll have access to everything inside of the project space.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So you can do it that way. Yeah, good question. Awesome. Kathleen, I see that you're still muted. I'm hoping it's because you don't have any questions and not because you can't unmute yourself currently. Anything else while we're still here? Any other questions you may have? Okay, it doesn't sound like that's the case. Before I let everyone go, if there aren't any other questions, I do want to highlight that we do have other webinars. You can see here this page. This is where you registered for today's, but we do have other upcoming. I mentioned earlier, there's the teacher version of these, which goes through other areas, including projects, media, etc. So if you wanted to sort of get the full version, you can sign up for one of these teacher webinars where we'll go through more areas of WeVideo. And of course, I definitely recommend if you have teachers that are going to be using to sharing this page with them so that they can register if they want to, have one of these webinar sessions with us. Any final questions or thoughts before I end the call here today? Okay, doesn't sound like it. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us here today. I hope the information was useful. If there are any questions down the road, please feel free to reach out. I hope everyone is staying safe. And just know that we're here to help in any way that you may need to. Remote learning, WeVideo, this may all be new to everyone. So we want to be a resource for you all as you continue to navigate this space, connect with your students digitally, remotely. We're here to help. So please reach out if you do have any questions down the road. With that, I want to thank again everyone for joining here today. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the week.